Absolutely. So as everyone in the audience probably remembers, when you have an IDH1 or an IDH2 mutation, these mutant enzymes lead to the production of what's called an oncometabolite, a substance called beta-hydroxyglutarate that gets derived from alpha-ketoglutarate. And increased intracellular levels of beta-hydroxyglutarate lead to block and myeloid differentiation and ultimately the clinical phenotype of acute myeloid leukemia. So the hypothesis has always been that if you can drug this specific mutation, either an IDH1 or an IDH2, you can lower the levels of beta-hydroxyglutarate, and that could lead or will lead to reversal of the block and myeloid differentiation and cure of AML. So we've been very excited because there have been one IDH inhibitor, the IDH2 inhibitor Enasidenib, was approved last year by the US Food and Drug Administration for the treatment of relapsed and refractory acute myeloid leukemia. That was based on an overall response rate of about 40% in patients with relapsed and refractory AML. 20% of those patients had a true complete remission, and the duration of response was quite good. It was approximately 6 months. The IDH1 inhibitor Ivosidenib, pronounced differently than Enasidenib, Ivosidenib, that drug is now in front of the FDA for approval. That drug shows similar response rates. The overall response rate is about 40%. The rate of complete remission and complete remission with what is called incomplete hematologic recovery, that's called a CRH, is also about 10%. So that leads to if you combine those two, a composite complete remission rate of 30%. That drug is also now in front of the FDA for approval. Both drugs, the IDH2 inhibitor Enasidenib, the IDH1 inhibitor Ivosidenib, my understanding is that it will be in front of the European Medicines Agency within the next 6 to 12 months for review. There are other IDH inhibitors in clinical development. One of them is from a company called Forma Therapeutics. That data has not been presented yet as far as I know. The Bayer pharmaceutical company has an IDH1 inhibitor in development. And it's interesting that there are a variety of companies developing IDH1 inhibitors. Really only Celgene and Agios developed an IDH2 inhibitor. And that's really, I think, for a practical commercial reason, which is that IDH1 mutations are not only found in acute myeloid leukemia, they're also found in about 70% of patients with secondary glioblastomas and low-grade gliomas. They're also found in other solid tumor malignancies. So the market for those drugs ends up being a little bit bigger.